one of the things about dog training is that you have to be able to kind of leave your mistakes behind you. No matter how many times you do this, it's not going to be perfect every time. And so the more you know, the more paralyzing it can be, right? A little bit like, ooh, I don't want to do anything wrong, so you do nothing. So what we're hoping is that you take that hope and opportunity to do it right from the ground up, that you pay attention to certain kind of core principles and understand how dogs learn and the way to best structure their early environments and things like that to avoid behavior problems, but recognizing that there's no kind of hard and fast rules. There's lots of guidelines, but they need to be adjusted to the individual dog. Right? And so what we are going to talk about is, for today's lecture, for instance, a big portion of our today's lecture is going to be on socialization. And the proper socialization regime for one type of dog is not the proper socialization regime for another, right? Because of their differences in temperament. And so hopefully, as we go through this class, you'll get an understanding of how the kind of best way to approach early training and socialization is without creating too many problems, and then you'll learn hopefully how to bounce back from the inevitable mistakes that everybody makes, right? You can't control environment perfectly. Things happen, life happens to dogs as well as human beings, and so none of that is perfect, but we want to minimize the errors we make to the best of our ability. The emphasis here is on the puppy's attitude regarding learning more than behavior creation specifically. So in the past, years ago, we used to try to get puppies to do a lot more specific behaviors. So you got a puppy and you started teaching it to sit and down and come, and you're laying there. So we were concerned with getting the dog to actually do what would be considered obedience behaviors. As I've grown and evolved in my training, I think I'm concerned much less with the specific behaviors the puppy performs and more about their understanding of learning in general, their focus on the handler, building certain tools that we're going to use to manipulate the dog going forward. So I'm in less of a rush to teach them how to sit, for instance, and more focused on how they perceive the world, controlling their motivations, controlling their focus, teaching them a good attitude, and teaching them how to learn. And so this class, though, we will cover some behaviors. We're not going into a whole bunch of detailed behavior creation like we would in an obedience class, although we'll touch on the beginnings of it. We're going to talk about larger concepts primarily. So the core concepts that we're going to cover in the class, management is one of them. And management is all those things that we do with dogs to live with them while they're getting trained, ultimately, right? And so dogs don't come out trained. Training's a process, and you have to control the dog's environment while they're learning. Otherwise, they get in trouble. They're unsafe. They hurt themselves. They can be injured, or bad behaviors develop. And most of what we do with puppies, and a lot of dog training actually, is centered around management. It may be the most important piece of the dog training puzzle, right? And so management includes the use of crates and X-pens and things like that to control your dog's behavior. It's puppy-proofing your house, right? Just like you'd child-proof your house if you had a toddler. You wouldn't leave electrical cords laying around everywhere, right? And all those sorts of things. You'd pick up your poisonous plants, and you'd take up the rat poison and things like that, right? And then it's also paying attention to your environment. Right? This is going to be a common theme. Throughout the class, I'm going to talk extensively about paying attention to what's happening around you and your puppy, and paying attention to what your puppy is paying attention to, right? Where their focus is, controlling what they're attending to. And a lot of behavior problems are headed off by being kind of a step ahead of the dog. And being a step ahead of your dog or your puppy requires that you be attentive, right? And this is a skill that dog trainers cultivate over time. This awareness of what's going on around you and what your dog's paying attention to. The average person doesn't necessarily pay attention to their environment all the time. You see the average pet dog or companion dog owner out for a walk, they're walking along, they're not watching what their dog's watching, they're just out for a walk with their dog. And their puppy may be intensely focused on something coming towards them that's a little bit maybe scary to the puppy or something like that, and you don't notice that until the puppy has a bad experience and reacts in some fashion. So cultivating that sense of awareness, it's going to be really important around here, right? So people are moving around our space here. There's lots of people, lots of dogs coming and going. It's a kind of, can be an overwhelming environment for puppies. So paying attention to hey, what's happening around you? Is there somebody coming towards you with another dog? Before you take your puppy out of the crate, what's going on around you? Don't just pop the door out and let the puppy out. See what's happening. Is there another dog in the crate next to your dog? All those things, those awarenesses are going to be cultivated. So management is 3/4 of what we do with puppies, right? Controlling their environment. And one of the biggest ways in which people fail in training is they inadequately manage their puppy. They give their puppies too much freedom. Have the puppy loose in the house and they leave it unattended, they're not watching it, it has an accident, it chews on something, all kinds of bad behavior. It gets started because people didn't want to confine or control the puppy's environment in the early stages. It's not super fun, it's a little bit labor intensive, but I cannot overemphasize. We actually have a week-long class just on management. That's how important I think it is, right? We can talk about this by itself for an entire class. It's a really important piece of the puzzle. So we'll hit on some of the common pieces in here as we go through.